Hello Year 2, welcome back. This is lesson 2 for our first week of our new topic about ancient China. So, last lesson we were looking at the Great Wall of China. Have a quick think about everything that we covered. Think about whether you've looked at any facts. If you did do some of your own research, I look forward to I've probably already seen that on Tapestry, looking at some of the own research that you did about the other areas, and thank you very much for doing that. So, this lesson we're going to be looking at the Forbidden City. Now that sounds very exciting. So my turn, your turn. The Forbidden City. The Forbidden City. Now if you have a quick think about the words the Forbidden City, what do you reckon that means? If you're thinking something along the lines where it might mean not everyone was allowed in there, or no one was allowed in there, you're on the right lines there. The Forbidden City was a very sacred place that the emperor was ordered to be built. So, Forbidden City was a place for the Chinese emperors during the Ming and Qing dynasties. It was at the heart of Beijing, so it was in the centre-ish of Beijing, which Beijing is the capital of China. The Forbidden City is also the largest ancient palace in the whole world. The Forbidden City was built under the powerful Yongle Emperor as part of the Ming dynasty between the years 1406 and 1420. Now this Forbidden City was something that had never been seen before. It got the most fantastic materials from all over China that the emperor had ordered in to build this. That was amazing gold blocks that were melted into these huge blocks for the city. There was also fantastic marble, and there was also the Phoebe Zhenan trees, which is a very famous tree that you might see if I'll put a picture up now in China, and it's a very rare tree, and I think it's almost endangered because they don't grow anywhere else. So the Forbidden City is enormous. It's huge. It is 178 acres long. It's got 90 palaces with courtyards. It also has at least 8,700 rooms, and the floor space is 1.6 million square foot. Now can you imagine having to clean that? That wouldn't be very fun at all, I don't think. The emperor had like an army of servants that would stay in the Forbidden City with him to make sure that it was always looking its best. So, the Forbidden City was not only a place for the emperor and his family to go, but it was also a bit of a fortress. It meant that any enemies or assassins weren't able to get in because it was such a well-defended fortress. So it had walls that were 26 feet high, so that's about 8 meters high, so that's a meter shorter than the highest point of the Great Wall. So it was a very big wall, and it had 170 feet wide moat. So a moat is the bit that I think you learnt about this in year 1. It goes around the Forbidden City, and it's like a lake that goes around to stop people from being able to walk straight in. You had to go over a bridge to get to the Forbidden City. At each corner of the palace, it had a huge towers, and in those towers you could have the guards that would be watching every corner of the Forbidden City to make sure that there was no assassins or enemies able to get in to hurt the emperor or his family. So, each side of the palace had a gate. Now I want to get these names right. And it had a main gate, which was the Meridian Gate to the south, and it had the other gates, which were the Gate of Divine Might to the north, the East Glorious Gate, and the West Glorious Gate. So, the Forbidden City was made in a very particular way. It was made up in 2 sections. The first section was the outer courtyard, and the outer courtyard was where the emperor would do all of his ceremonies, and this is where he'd see the majority of the people that he was coming to meet. Then he had the inner courtyard. The inner courtyard was just inside of the outer courtyard, and that's where his family would stay and where he would stay. And that's the most protected part of the Forbidden City. You'd have your guards around the inner courtyard, making sure that no one could get in. In the outer courtyard, there were three main buildings. So you had the hall, preserving harmony, you had the hall of central harmony, and you had the hall of supreme harmony. The largest of the three was the hall of supreme harmony. It was the building that the emperors held court during the Ming dynasty. So that's where it would be like a courtroom, that hall of supreme harmony. The emperor would stay in a palace of heavenly purity. That would be in the inner courtyard. And what we need to remind ourselves is during ancient China, the emperor was thought to be the closest person to God. And the gods. So they believed in multiple different gods, and they thought that they were the closest to God if you were the emperor. One of the things that that you have to remember is all these place names that are heavenly purity, you know, and the temple of heaven, which we'll be looking at in the next lesson. These are all because the emperor themselves thought that they were able to be so close to God, they were the only ones that could communicate with the gods, and that meant that they were heavenly. So the emperor would have an empress, which is a little bit like a queen and a king. The empress would stay in the palace of earthly tranquility, and that again just shows us that if the emperor is staying in a heavenly purity versus an earthly tranquility, it shows us how they saw men and women. The man, the emperor, was heavenly and the woman was earthly. So it just shows that, and that would be very different today, how we understand that men and women are equal. But back then it shows us that the men saw themselves as being better, which we know is not correct. One of the interesting things about the design of the Forbidden City is all the buildings were facing south. And the reason that they did this was they saw the north, which is obviously where the border was, the northern border where the Great War was, to Mongolia, or the Mongol Empire. They saw the north as being cold winds and enemies and a dark place. And they saw the south as being holy and heavenly, so that all the buildings had to face that way and away from the north where they disliked that area. The roof of the buildings always had the colour of either red or yellow, and usually was yellow because the emperor saw this as the ultimate power colour. He saw that as it was like gold, and he was able to show so much power with these yellow lined tiles on the roof. All the ceremonial buildings were in threes, and the reason it's three is they saw three as being like a heavenly number. It was the closest thing that they saw as being in threes, and we see this again in the Temple of Heaven, which is tomorrow, the next lesson, sorry. We see it as in the Temple of Heaven they've got hell and earth and heaven, and that was in the threes again, so they really fascinated on these threes. The design of the palace usually follows the five main colours of the elements as they saw them. So we've got black, white, red, yellow and green. And those five colours would just be used again and again in different areas for the building. One of the examples is the library that they had there. They had the roof as being black, because black to them represented the element of water, and that meant if you had water on your building, it meant it would be protected from fire. And that's the kind of things you have to realise, that during the ancient China they believed a lot of the elements and gods, and they had a big understanding of how if they did sacrifices and they followed traditions, they were closer to God, they were given good luck, and they lived a better life. And that's something that we don't really see too often today. It happens in religions. You follow a good religion journey, and you are rewarded for it in either like an afterlife or other aspects of that religion. But other than that, it's not really been followed too much today unless it is through a religion. One of the best things about the Forbidden City was the Emperor's room. Now, if you were an emperor, you could design your room to look as amazing as you want. You wanted a gold chair? Bang! You've got a gold throne to sit on. You wanted a bed that had a lotus flower mattress? Absolutely not a problem. You can get yourself one of them. And you had so much power you could make it whatever you wanted. And it wasn't just one room, no. Remember, this place had over 8,000 rooms. So the Emperor would have lots of different rooms. Some of them had up to 4 or 5 huge rooms. But really, because they were Emperor, they could have any room they really wanted. Now I've got a bit of a challenge for you. I want you to put yourself in the place of being the Emperor of China, as part of one of the biggest dynasties that you could have chosen. You could have had the Ming dynasty, or you could. There's so many to choose from, and you can do some extra research about those dynasties if you'd like. We'll touch on it in a few weeks, but right now we're thinking about the Forbidden City. I want you to put yourself in the position of the Emperor and design the coolest and most extravagant, which means the most amazing room ever. If you want a dragon sculpture completely made out of gold, go for it. Because you're the Emperor, you can do whatever you want. I want you to then draw it on a piece of paper for me, start labelling it off. Maybe you could do some of your own research about what the Emperor had in his rooms, and you can then steal or magpie those ideas. I'm sorry, my camera cut off there. So, I was saying, you could research a little bit on the computer or on whatever device you're watching this on. You could have a look at what the actual Emperor's room had in there. You see something you like, you can magpie that idea and you can put it into your own design of a room. I really look forward to seeing your creative ideas. Make sure it's not too silly and it fits with the theme of ancient China. We don't want any silly unicorns in there or anything like that, because that doesn't really fit. Okay, but make sure it fits in with the theme we're going for. Remember, they had those 5 colours, which was black, red, yellow, white and green. Those are the 5 colours that you might want to then put into your room. So again, everything onto tapestry. I look forward to seeing these ideas. Thank you for coming along to this lesson. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, Year 2.